Deputy Peadar Tóibín is next.
Obviously, there's a dispute here on whether or not abortion happens on the basis of gender, and it is estimated that there are 100 million missing women in the world today with regards to gender selection abortion and infanticide. And just to give Deputy Chambers some of the facts with regards to that, in China, for example, the sex ratio for the generation born between 1985 and 1989 was 108 men for every 100 women. By the generation born in between 2000 and 2004, it was 124 men for every 100 women. And in some provinces, it's at unprecedented levels, and it's at 130 men for every woman in those particular provinces. In countries like Taiwan, South Korea, Pakistan, India, Armenia, Azerbaijan, they're having major problems with it. In India, there is a radical gender ratio divergence at the moment because of the fact that for economic reasons, for social reasons, and for cultural reasons, unfortunately and shockingly, they favour sons rather than daughters. And these facts can be clearly seen by anybody who actually takes a second or two to investigate them as well. Now, people might think that this only happens in these particular countries, but they're happening in Western countries as well. And I'd be happy to let Deputy Chambers understand that a lecturer in statistics in the Imperial College in London says amongst these immigrant groups that live in these countries, there was clear evidence of a trend, and the only reliable available explanation that is consistent with a statistically significant gender shift of that sort observed in the census data is gender selection abortion. Now, it is shocking to me that this could happen or would happen, but it is happening in Western countries. It's happening in Canada, it's happening in Britain, it's happening in the United States of America. And so much so, Deputy Chambers should realise that the Labour MP Naz Shah, the shadow Women and Equality Minister in Britain, has now called for the ban of gender selection abortion in Britain. Now, the Labour Party in Britain is no bastion of pro-life views in any manner whatsoever, but they know because of non-invasive pregnancy testing in Britain, at 9 weeks it's possible to identify the gender of the unborn child and as a result have an abortion on that basis. And they know it's happening in Britain. Now, I don't think that Irish people are morally superior to British people, and we all live in a globalised society, and there are many of these cultural people living in Ireland who would have the same views as they would have in India and China, etc. So I think it's obviously clear within the legislation that this is possible. It's obviously clear in the legislation that this is legal. And all I'm saying is that we should follow the advice and the example of the British Labour Party and actually lay down a clear marker that gender selection abortion would not be allowed here as well. With regards to disability, and this is really important, Minister Harris stated that in another contribution that it was important for the government to stick with the general gist of the debate around the referendum, because he said before the referendum that people were saying don't trust politicians because when they actually legislate, it'll be radically different from what they articulated in advance of the referendum. And in February, the minister said that there will absolutely not be a right to have an abortion on the basis of disability in this bill. He said that explicitly won't be allowed. And again, because we know of non-invasive pregnancy testing at 9 weeks, and you can get it in this country currently, and within 3 days you can get the results of that particular pregnancy test, and it will tell you with regards what disability there may or not be within the pregnancy. And within this particular legislation, it is absolutely practically feasible for a person to have an abortion on the basis of disability. It allows for it, this legislation. And to be honest, it's one of the issues that actually motivated so many people on our side of the debate when the referendum was happening at the time. And I was at a public meeting in Kerry on Monday, and 2 women who had voted yes said they voted yes on the understanding that it's explicitly illegal in this legislation to have an abortion on the basis of disability. It's not. It's explicitly allowed, because you can have an abortion without indication up until 12 weeks. So that, by definition, allows for it to happen. Now, again, people will say this won't happen in Ireland. But, you know, we just need to look at our nearest neighbour. There's an organisation called Don't Screen Us Out. Now, think about that for a second. In the 21st century, people with disabilities in Britain have come together to create an organisation called Don't Screen Us Out, and they're asking able-bodied people not to select out people with disabilities before birth. Because at the moment, and again, just to quote the statistics that's happening in Britain, there is a situation where it's I don't have the name of the organisation, but it's a state Department of Health organisation which have indicated that the birth rates for children with disabilities, children with Down syndrome, are falling by about 13% at the moment, because 90% of children diagnosed in the womb with Down syndrome are unfortunately being aborted. And I just think that it would be a very strong message for us to send out, to say that we will protect people with disabilities in this legislation 100%, and that we would simply put into the legislation the promise and the commitments that the Minister gave before the referendum itself. Just the other point that I would make is, if you're looking for another example of a European country, in the Netherlands, the Minister for Health was asked a question, and the question was, you know, what would happen if the right to choose led to a situation where no more children with disabilities were born? And the Minister for Health in the Netherlands said, well, that is something that we would have to get used to. And that's a startling situation, a startling situation. And anybody who believes that they should leave a gap here in the legislation on this, I just think we have to really look into our own hearts and ask, is it fair that we do that?
Thank you, David.
And there are people on the other side that I know that are decent people who want abortion rights, and decent people whose instinct it is not to restrict it in any way at all, because they believe that access is so important. But all I would say is, in these two situations, we should be able to go a step towards each other in some way to provide for some protection in these two situations.
Thank you, David.